Hello. Hi. So, we're back again. I'm honestly loving this. Um, it's been really helpful for my healing journey. So, um, some things I want to talk about are really, again, so much. I could literally talk about everything. But I guess, yesterday I shared something pretty big for me, which was that my experience and the abuse that I endured in my parents' home was so intense, it led me to become homeless. So there was so much that led to that, um, because of what I was taught and shown in my home growing up. I thought that that was what I was supposed to have in relationships. So every friendship, um, and any type of like intimate partner relationship. So during the time that I became homeless, I was in a very abusive relationship, and I couldn't figure out like which abuse was worse. Like the abuse that I was dealing with at home with my parents, or the abuse that was happening within that relationship. Um, and really, there is no comparison because both of those experiences were two separate things, and overall, it was just abusive. Um, but yeah, I ultimately decided on Christmas Eve to literally pack all of my things and leave my parents' home. And so I did. I packed my things and chose on Christmas morning that I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. And my whole family, I think at the time it was my mom, my dad, and my brother. Because my two older sisters had moved out on their own time as well. Um, so I think my brother was trying to get me to stay, and my mom was, my mom was saying, you need to stay. And then, my dad could care less. He was honestly just like watching TV, and I was like packing all my stuff and leaving. So I don't think I knew where I was going. My boyfriend at the time gave me the idea of like, yeah, you should leave. And I'm like, yeah, I should. I need to get away from this abuse. So I really didn't have a plan. I just like, I'm leaving. And my sister, who was closest in age with me, she was living with some friends at the time. And I think I reached out to her and I was like, I got to get away from mom and dad. And she's like, yeah, I totally get it. So I think I spent Christmas with my boyfriend at the time's family, and then I went to where my sister was living, and I stayed there for like a couple nights. And then she's like, what are you gonna do? Like, where are you gonna go? And I told her I was gonna go live with a friend, which was obviously not the truth. I had no idea where I was going. But the thought of what my abusive boyfriend at the time told me was, live in a tent. And I didn't even question it. I was like, yeah. Like, this is someone who never had any type of help mentally. And I obviously needed support with my mental health. And I had no idea what I was doing to myself ever. But I had a lot of like self-harm tendencies where it was like always looking for attention. So like I didn't care what I did to myself. I just was like, oh, people are giving me the attention that I've been longing for. So yeah, I had no idea what I even was doing to myself. But that's when I was like, all right, I'm going to Walmart. Meanwhile, this is Christmas Eve or like Christmas time. So I forget like the actual day. I know that I packed my stuff Christmas Eve. I know that I left Christmas Day, but it was around that time because I know I spent some time at where my sister was living at the time. It was end of December, like middle of the holidays. And yeah, went to Walmart, bought tarp, bought the tent. I had no idea like what I was even buying. Like, I mean, I can just imagine myself. So like with PTSD and like anxiety and depression, like I've suppressed like so much of what I lived because a lot of it was just normalized. So, but yeah, I remember being in the aisle of Walmart and like picking out like this orange tent, which probably wasn't the best idea because I was trying to be hidden, but my boyfriend at the time is on the phone with me and he's like, yeah, get some tarp because it's going to be cold. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So get the tarp. I think I got 2 tarps because I needed tarp on the bottom. Meanwhile, because this is like the snow in New England. So, so yeah, I went, my parents live in Foxborough. And so I was by Gillette Stadium. I knew that whereabouts because my parents live so close to the stadium. Like I would walk like by the train tracks and stuff, so I knew the woods pretty well. So that was where that's where I was gonna live. And so yeah, I lived there. I literally walked. It was like 2010. There was so much snow. But I mean, my abusive boyfriend did not help me. Like I did this myself. But I got everything and I don't even think I had a car at the time because when I left my family, they had the car. I was taking a lot of taxis. So anyway, I set up and I don't even know what was going through my mind because I laid down the tarp on snow, set up my orange tent. I packed everything from my parents' house. So like I had like my snowboard and like my snow boots, like my snowboarding boots and like all my clothes and bags. Like it did not look like I was homeless. But literally like that's what it does. The abuse and the trauma like does to your brain. And like, since I was getting no help, I was just like, yeah, this is what's keeping me safe. Like I was keeping myself safe. So I was like, yeah, this is where I need to belong. And, anyway, I put like tons of sweatshirts on and I was like, this is where I'm sleeping. And I lived there for about like 3 months. And, yeah, so I decided that I wasn't going to have contact with my family for 3 years. And they did not like that. They kept trying to find me. So I was like 18 and I had no contact with them. So yeah, I lived in the tent for like 3 to 4 months and then I ended up living with a friend because I decided to tell my friend. I told her in the creepiest way. Like, I literally called her and I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Like, do you want to go to Patriot Place and like meet up? And she's like, yeah. And so we went to Patriot Place and I like look like I haven't showered because when I was homeless, I lived in the woods. And I went to the YMCA to shower. Like that's how I showered, was I would go to the Foxborough YMCA and take showers. And I didn't even have an active membership, but I think they just like felt so bad for me that they were like, they didn't care. They were just like, go. So I would go to the women's locker room and take a shower. But yeah, so my friend met me at Patriot Place and like we started talking and I was like, I'm going to take you somewhere. Like it definitely was like wicked creepy. And I was like, I'm going to show you some place. And ended up walking her into the woods and she's like, where are we going? Because she was dressed for like going to Patriot Place. And so she's like in her heels walking through the woods and she's just like, what are we doing here? And I'm like, I'm just, because I was trying to reach out for help. Like I was definitely trying to get help and I just didn't know how to ask for help. Literally shaking like as I'm speaking because it's heavy stuff that, like I've mentioned before, like I am such a different person now. So it's like hard to believe that this used to be my life. But yeah, so yeah, I walked her into the woods and she was like, what is this place? I was like, I live here. And she was like, D'Angelo, we have to get you out of this place. And I'm like, okay. So she literally called her mom and she's like, you're going to live with us. And so I lived there for a little bit. Obviously my abusive relationship with my boyfriend, I had such clouded judgment. I was addicted to marijuana. Like I was just not okay mentally. And so I ended up being pretty disrespectful to them. They welcomed me and opened, into their home. And I was just, I had a lying problem. I needed attention. I would exaggerate the abuse so much because I just wanted people to believe me. So, that's what I was doing a lot. And so, I mean, eventually they're like, you can't do this anymore. You can't live here anymore. So, I eventually found a place to live in different apartments, like nearby, and had to start from scratch. And I started working at Dunkin' Donuts and, I eventually ended up becoming a manager at Dunkin' Donuts, like worked my way up and it was cool, but, went through a lot of different types of abuse still with that boyfriend. And with that boyfriend, it was intense. Like he would literally like punch me in the face and things that I didn't know. Like at the time I was like, I have to defend myself. And so I would defend myself with him. And he was really the only person I defended myself to. And then now I know what self-defense means and like reactive abuse. And like, I just didn't, like, I felt like I was an abuser because like he would hurt me and then I would defend myself. And then I thought like I was just as bad as him. When now in the class, I'm literally shaking, but like now in the classes that I'm taking for therapy and support groups and everything, like I understand that I was really defending myself with what he was doing to me. Cause like I would drive and he would like punch in the windshield as I was driving or like take my phone and throw my phone out the window or punch me in the face and I would get black eyes. But like, because I left my family, like I told myself I left my family for him, which made no sense, because I was leaving my family for abuse, but I was being abused by him. It was very confusing. So I was like, I can't leave him. I left my family. I don't have anyone. Like I lost like all friends because all I was doing was like lying. I was addicted to marijuana. Like I was so in need of therapy. But therapy was not really talked about in my family. So I didn't even know like where to begin to get therapy, to get help. So, I just thought I could not lose this boyfriend. Like I don't have anyone. So, yeah, I stayed with him and then my family wouldn't stop. Like they would keep trying to find me and like keep trying to get me to come back to them. And part of me was like, just leave me alone. And then the other part of me was like, but like, what am I missing? Like, is this the right decision? Because trauma bonds are real. Like we've all experienced these things like in the family. Like, we all have our different experience. Like, we all have a different experience, but like, we all experienced something together. So that like holds us together in a sense. And so, yeah, my mom would like send me things. She didn't know where I lived, but she knew the town I lived in, because the town that I lived in, she owned a business, and like her and my dad owned a business there. So like, I think eventually she ended up running into me, and I was just like hiding. And then I worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and like they would try to find me at Dunkin' Donuts and like trap me and be like, you need to come home. You need to come home. So this was like 3 years, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, I was like 20. And I would just ignore them at all costs. And then my mom had been telling the mail carrier, like the mail people, I know she lives in this town, like put mail at the post office and have her come in and get it. And so that's what I did. They called me and said, like, you have mail at the post office, come pick it up. And so I went to the post office, and there was like this big box of what I've missed in the past 3 years. Like, my oldest sister was engaged. She had a baby. Like, and I just felt so guilty. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like I left my family, and like I was bawling my eyes out. I'm like, I'm being abused by my boyfriend. Like, I've lost all my friends. Like, I don't know where life's taking me. And now I have a nephew that I've never met. Like, but I also like didn't know how to leave that boyfriend either. And, I ended up finding out eventually, because my mom kept like sending mail and having this like routine of like, I'm going to find you. And, at the time I remembered how abusive they were, but I was also like, I'm being abused by my boyfriend. So it's like, what's worse? And then it's like, now I have this nephew that I really want to meet. And like, there was just so much happening in my brain. So, but eventually I ended up finding out my boyfriend was like heavily cheating on me with like multiple different people. And everything was like a lie. So I think eventually I left him, and, I used to like keep their phone numbers, like my sister and stuff, like hidden, because if I had my family belongings by this boyfriend, like he would take them and like rip them, because me and that boyfriend had a trauma bond too. So he was like he also had a lying problem and like an addiction problem. And like, so, we were pretty similar. And, I would hide my things with my family because I didn't want him to think that I was like disobeying him and like going behind his back and like going back to my family. And so, anyway, I had this picture, and behind the picture was some phone numbers of like emergency family, like cousins, because I cut off all family, like cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, obviously my parents, my siblings. And then so I got the phone numbers. This was like, I don't even know, 2012, maybe 2011. I don't even know what year it was, but I ended up calling my sister, and she was so confused, and she was like, D'Angela? I'm like, yeah, it's me. And she's like, this is where I live. Get on a train and come see me now. And I was like, hey. And I was like, okay. And so I got on the nearest train, and I was like, I'm going to take my life back. Like, I got this. I was literally just like leaving one abusive situation and going back to, hey, Jerry, and going back to an abusive situation with like my siblings and my parents. But I just had that trauma bond is like so real, because I was like, I'm doing good. I'm getting my life back. Like, I remember I was addicted to like Eminem, and I was listening to the song 25 to Life, and I was jamming, walking to the train station, just being like, I'm going to go meet my nephew. I'm going to go see my sister. Like, this is going to be amazing. And I did that. Like, my sister welcomed me, and it was like, I met my nephew, and I was like bawling my eyes out. I was like, I can't believe I did this. Like, I chose to live in a tent. Like, I stayed with an abusive boyfriend. Like, you know, he was worse than what I dealt with at home. Like, you know, I'm so grateful to meet my nephew. Like, I was just like filled with all this love, and, you know, that this was the right idea. But eventually it turned into like I owed my family a debt because I left them. So it was like held over my head for so long. And then it was like my dad would be like, you know, you said all these things about us. You did, because I was being abused by them. But like I had mentioned in my second live, like with the sexual assault, like I didn't think anyone was ever going to believe me. Like, I was instilled since I was a young kid in my brain that I was a liar. Like, that's all my family would ever tell me is like, you're a liar. Like, nobody's ever going to believe you. Like, you're a pathological liar. Or you're a compulsive liar. So I just knew I was a liar. And so, and I just knew by the actions of my parents that in order for people to believe you, like, you have to convince them. And so even though I was being abused, and even though these things happened to me, I would fluff stories up so that it would make it more believable so people would listen to me. And, you know, so there was some lying that I did about my family. And my dad would hold that over my head. Like, you lied and you said this and you said that and you said this. And, you know, but I could bring that up, but I'm not going to. I had you come back into this house, you know, but you have to do this, this, and this, and this. And this is my house and you have to do this. So eventually the abuse just kind of like got more intense because I owed them this debt. Like, I left them for years, and I didn't know that my sister was engaged and had a baby. And so it was like I couldn't get that time back with them. So it was like, and I just felt such guilt. So I was like, I'll do anything for you guys. Like, I can't believe I did this to you. And it all got turned on to me. Like all of the abuse that I went through as a kid got thrown out the door because of me leaving them and me, you know, lying and me, being homeless. Like, I ended up telling them I lived in a tent. Like, I was like, hey, I wasn't really living with my friend. And they were like, where were you living? And I told my sister first, and she was laughing hysterically. I was still addicted to marijuana. So, that's what was happening when I told them. And I told my brother, I told, my sister's fiance, who has been like a brother to me. So he was like another brother basically, but, they were laughing hysterically, and it's like, I was not ready for the laughter yet. I was still like, this is real fresh. This is like, I can't believe I just told you guys I lived in a tent. And they started asking like questions like, where'd you go to the bathroom? I'm like, in the woods. And they're like, how'd you shower? I'm like, I went to the YMCA and showered. And they were like, it was just, I mean, it's hard to believe. Like, it's really like, what? You really chose to live in a tent? And it's like, yeah, that was me trying to protect myself. Like, I was trying to be safe. It doesn't make any sense at all. But I knew that the abuse at my home was so bad. And what I went through with my boyfriend at the time, it was like, that's what I was doing to feel safe. Like, but yeah. So, they basically held that over my head for years, and I couldn't leave them. Like, I could not leave them. I'm like, I can't leave them because I left them already. And I think a part of me, like the younger version of me, knew that I had to get away from them. So, but because I was so involved with that boyfriend who was abusive, I didn't know like what was right and what was wrong. I was too busy comparing like whose abuse was worse, and like I just didn't know who I was. Like, I did not know who I was. And so, yeah, eventually the abuse just got worse and worse. And, you know, because I broke up with that boyfriend, I kind of just moved on to, because I was like a huge addictive person where like I would switch from one addiction to the other addiction to another addiction. And so like obviously I was addicted to marijuana for a while, for 6 years. And I would also be addicted to attention, addicted to food. I was addicted to a lot of different types of things. But so eventually I would just not want to be at my parents' house and like move on to people who would let me sleep at their house, basically, so that I couldn't be near my parents. And then that's when I met my children's father. And definitely intense. That's why I say my son, my 5-year-old, saved my life, because I could have went down a really, 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 really dark path if I didn't get pregnant when I did. And with my children's father, like, I was being abused, like, before I got pregnant with my son. And when I got pregnant with my son, I was like, okay, even though I'm being abused, and even though, like, he was conceived by abuse, like, God wanted this to happen. Like, I knew right away when they told me. So I worked as a security officer at the time. I worked at Gillette Stadium, and I worked in the parking lot. So there was a golf cart that we would have to like travel to get to. We would go on golf carts and like go to the next parking lot area. And so my supervisor, I was on the golf cart and I got flung off the golf cart and I fell. And this was at like Monster Jam, one of the concerts, one of the like events that I used to work for. And I wasn't feeling well. And so eventually I ended up going to the hospital, and I used to get a lot of concussions. And so they were like, oh, is there any chance of pregnancy? And I like that's like a whole nother story. I genuinely thought that I couldn't have children. So I was like, no, there's no way. And yeah. And then, so the doctor comes back, obviously I'm a, female. And so they checked anyway. And so then they come back and the doctor's like, congratulations. And I was like, what? I have another concussion? And he's like, no, you're pregnant. I'm like, wow. Okay. So it was in that circumstance where I was like, thank you, God. Like, I literally said, thank you, God, because who knows what my life would have been if I did not become a mom. Because in that circumstance, I was like, I have to live my life for this child. Like, I am a mother. Like, I immediately became a mother. And I immediately was like, I'm going to protect this baby with everything that I have in me. My baby is not going to experience what I've experienced. Like, I went into like almost like the amount of dedication I have put into this, like going live on Instagram, getting my Facebook back, creating a TikTok, creating a podcast. Like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And so like when I got pregnant, I was like, I am going to be the best mom ever. Like, this is my baby. Like, we got this. And immediately, like, I started freaking out because I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm addicted to marijuana. Like, and the doctor's like, calm down. You're probably like 5 weeks pregnant. Just don't do it anymore. Like, and I changed my life. Like, I was like, I'm living my life for my son. And that's why I commonly say that my son saved my life, because I really don't know where I would be. That's just like a glimpse of like what on what I would do to myself, basically. And it all comes down to the exposure of domestic violence at a young age. And not getting the help I needed mentally, and numbing myself with marijuana and other things, food and attention, and then being sexually abused, and yeah, so. But I'd love to continue this conversation. I could keep going on and on and on. Thank you for those that joined, and we'll pick up on this next time. Thank you guys so much.